The thing about the Jess, about the BYOD is that if people did not read the description and say it's bring your own daiquiri, they would have thought it's bring your own device. That's what the public acronym stands for. So we'll see if people are going to be that interested in it. But I've got a great case that I want to show you guys or present, and then see how we solve it.
Good day, everybody. Rob Jansen's here. 7 minutes past. I'd like to ask Jessica to introduce the topic of BYOD. I don't see any daiquiris around, Jess.
They're imaginary. Virtual daiquiris.
Virtual daiquiris.
I'll be spamming you guys with emojis in a minute. The concept, well, the idea for the theme of the meetup arose from a story that was told in Meetup a little while ago about the sort of behavioral nudges that people use to encourage certain interactions in people. So we took a spin on this whole bring your own daiquiris, but today we're going to take a slightly different approach and actually look at the construct of behavior, of human behavior, in relation to three primary roles that are essential in all machine learning. So you've got your business user, you've got your data scientist, and you've got your technologists. So the question that we're kind of asking is, all right, so to the business person, behavior is important. To the data scientist, it's important for analysis. And is it important to the technologist at all? But Jay has got a very good talk for us today. So I'll hand over to you.
Thanks, Jess. So what I thought I'll do is maybe give you a preamble as to what the problem is we're trying to solve, and then look at it from the different roles that are normally involved in solving this problem. And then the idea is to have it in an open discussion. So the concept is that you are an executive inside, like in a hotel business, and you want to convince people to go from one hotel to the next on a promenade that you own or that you are kind of the manager of. And there are 4 hotels, and you want to see what the movement looks like of people from one to the next. And how do you nudge the people? How do you think about getting them from one place to another? And the original story, this is actually a real story from a while ago, but I'm going to give you kind of like a slightly nuanced version. And that is that if you run a happy hour in Hotel 1 that has got live entertainment and a whole lot of other things going on in there, and that it's a hotel that is, or a bar with a hotel that's normally busy in the afternoon, you want to move your happy hour to say 2 p.m. and you want to run specials on strawberry daiquiris. And the reason is because a strawberry daiquiri is not something that people will typically order unless it is something that you specifically like. So it's not like a beer or a whiskey or any of the other kind of alcoholic beverages that normally will be bought in certain kinds of volumes throughout a night. But anyway, so what you do is that, and the other thing about a strawberry daiquiri, if you don't know this, but it's a fairly cheap drink to make, and yet it's a fairly expensive on the menu. So the thing is that you want to run the happy hour, and then you want to be able to get those people who bought those daiquiris to go to the next happy hour at the next hotel where you're going to go for dinner, and the next hotel that you know that it's going to be for an after dinner drink. And then you want to get those people to either go to the really upmarket hotel for a nightcap, or they will go back to the first hotel where you've got night entertainment that will then start at about 8 or 9 or 10 at night, and then go out into the early morning hours. So you want to be able to see how you can get this crowd to move from one to the next by designing a series of interventions. So now, if you think of that story is normally told from a business point of view. So a business person would say to you that I understand my business, And I know that I can get people to go from one state to another state by running this thing called an happy hour. And for us, I'm not sure about you, but happy hour to me has never really meant much. It's just that you get drinks cheaper because you buy one, get one free. And in most cases, you can't even drink your second drink depending on what you're buying. But what you want to do with this special on a daiquiri is give it 50% off. And the person has to scan a QR code, or they have to leave a phone number or a message or something that you want to know that there's at least a base identity that gets tracked when this person has left some evidence. So the thing is that when a business person tells a story and you want to now implement it in kind of more modern times, if you think about this original story came from the late 80s, early 90s. But if you had to tell it today, what you're now going to have to do is you have to get your data scientist involved, and you're going to have to get your technologist involved. When you get your data scientist involved, they're going to want to know where you're going to get the data from. Are you going to get access to the data? How are we going to do feature engineering? Are we going to be able to do the distributions to understand that we are getting the correct volumes of data to be able to analyze anything? They want to understand how you want to nudge the people, and a whole lot of other things that normally are kind of within the data science kind of context. And then you have the technologist that would only care about, is this thing going to run? Are we going to be able to intervene potentially in real time? So can we collect the data the moment the person rings up a daiquiri on a point of sale terminal? At that very moment, what you want to do is track the fact that an item was sold, and then bring that and feed it to your data set. So is that possible? So now if you bring all of that together, what I want to do, I'll show you in 2 bits of context before we start the conversation. So the first bit of context is that if you had to think of the role of the business person, so the business person wants to understand the impact. So they want to know, if I can get this collective of people to stay within my business ecosystem, what will the impact be economically on my returns if I do provide a special on a daiquiri that I could have earned as an income? Will that be enough of an attractor, or do I need to run a special on something else? Do I need to put up events or do anything else that I need to do? So that means that in understanding this impact, you want to be able to track the projects that you guys are going to work on and that you need to review. So you want to know that, yes, there's going to be a project for a recommender and for a way to nudge people and to provide contextual messaging. And you want to be able to test each one of those options as a business person, because you might want to run some experiments. So you might want to say that, why don't we ask people to provide them with their phone numbers and to contact them with the next special, because it could be up at the next hotel, but you're not going to know which one. And we will notify you. So you obtain details from that person. They need to sign up just by providing their phone number, or they scan a QR code, or they text it, or they WhatsApp it. When you get it, you now have the entry point for your next outbound communication. So now what you need to do is you want to then provide them with messaging and then observe their responses. And then you want to take a control group, or one of your test groups, and you'll have a control group that you have to decide how you want to test this, obviously. But you want to take another group that you are not going to message at all, and you're going to rely entirely on your above-the-line messaging and your in-the-hotel entertainment and whatever to get them to act on what they need to act on. But it means at the end of the day that you're going to be able to run all these different experimentation scenarios, test what was going on, without having to go and build a very complex environment. So that means the business person wants to know, can I take my story? Can I get the impact? Can I get the result? Can I track this continuously? And is it doing the right thing from a business point of view? They don't care about accuracy and recall rates and predictability and any of those sort of things. They just care about the fact that, will this have an impact? The data scientist, like I said earlier, they're more worried about, can I get the data? Can I create my feature stores? Can I build models? Can I set up the experiments appropriately? Do I have the right tooling? Can I do this without a huge obstacle? Can I set up experiments without having to spend months doing it? I want to be able to do it within hours. I want to be able to configure it very quickly and be able to get it into an environment where you can implement it with a technologist, so that the technology person wants to track the performance, make sure that you've got an architecture that is resilient, that is implemented in an environment where you know that you can execute properly. And then you want to be able to provide feedback to the data scientist and to the business person to say, yes, we are getting the volumes that we are expecting or not, or whatever the key metrics are that you're going to be tracking through this exercise. So those are the three roles for, I guess, today's conversation. So the next bit of context is to see, well, what does it look like if you had to see it in virtual form or in drawing form. So let me just share my screen quickly and then we can talk about that. Okay, so here's kind of what it looks like. So you got the promenade. Jess, you should have done this part. You got the hotels. You've got your people at any point during the day will probably occupy all of the places that you are looking at. But we're seeing that, let's say, hotel 1 or location 1 is the one with the most activity we anticipating at a certain point during the day. What you intend doing is to look at the volume of sales over time per hotel. And what you want to do is that you will attempt to create this kind of effect where there's a part of the day where there's nothing. You want to maximize and you want to bring it down again. So classically what will happen is that you would have this kind of effect. So for a part of the day or for the part of whatever you're working on, there'll be some activity and then there'll be nothing. What you're trying to do is to get this effect where you can push people and trying to minimize the downtime that you have in getting to these peaks of sales from one location to the next. So that's kind of what the business person is looking at in their spreadsheet. They run some analysis and they say that if we only had to focus on, like this one that we looked earlier, there are not too many opportunities exploited, and we want to find out how we can push it in different directions so we can broaden our revenue base. So that means that what you want to do as time goes by, so you want to break these up into time brackets. So you've got phases throughout the day. And for this exercise, let's just say if you look at phase 1, 2, and 3, let's allocate phase 1 to hotel 2 and to 3. And then what you want to do is you want to have a spike to get from, if I think of the next morning, it must go back to 1. So you want to get people back to 1. So you want to get this group of people to go there. You want that group of people then to go there and make sure that it's sufficiently exciting to do that. And then you want that group of people to go back there. So you keep them in your ecosystem with different kinds of activities. So you start with an afternoon activity at hotel 1. You move to hotel 2, like we said earlier, for dinner, maybe some movie or other kind of light entertainment at 3. And then for those who are the diehards who really want to go and have another wave of daiquiris or switch it for something else, go back to number 1. So the construct, and maybe this is now for the kind of conversation, is that if you had to think of it in the kind of way that we often look at this, when you see time and you see the act of what you want people to perform and you look at the location of where it's done, you want to be able to track time, location, and act data in real time or in an offline fashion across all of these situations to be able to predict what you need to do with the individuals that are participating in one particular activity, so that you can find out what the network looks like, use the network effect to influence them to move to the next and to the next hotel or to the next and the next location where you want them to get to perform whatever the act is. So that means you need a diversity in actions that you want to validate socially. You want a spectrum of time that you know that it's going to give you an activity, and you want a location that you know where items are going to take place. And those 3 dimensions together will give you an understanding of how you can influence that system. So I figured that's kind of where I want to leave it, but that's the entry point into the conversation.
So I have a question about this. It seems relatively straightforward, actually, in theory. I don't feel like there's very much that I could say right now that would challenge it. However, the question is, it's one thing to be in theory, but has this worked in practice?
It has worked in practice. If you had to think of at the time when this happened, the CFO who wanted the revenue shifts to happen could clearly see that there were very big differences between hotel 1 and 2 especially. And you could see how people will move from 1 to 2, because if 1 gets too raucous in the afternoon going into the early evening, you'll see families and certain people of certain age brackets will move to the second hotel for further entertainment. So that means that if somebody is going to want to watch music, they will not at the same time want to watch comedy. So what you'll do is you'll move the comedy to either the early afternoon in hotel 1, and you move the live entertainment that is light entertainment to 2, and you move the more party entertainment back to 1 later in the evening. And you could see that people will move between different categories, and that's why the context of the act. So if the act is comedy, or the act is music, or the act is social, each human activity or each human set of activities resulted in certain kinds of people only wanting to go to certain places. And yes, it had a big impact. It ran for probably 8 years as what was known at the time as a strawberry run. And that was to trying to get people to go up and down. And the people who ended up at Hotel 3, that was a very different class of upmarket hotel, were the ones who did 1 and 2, that was more relaxed, and eventually got to 3 because somebody would take out like their spouse for a dinner or something like that, because it was a very different style of facility. So in this case, you could see that if you had 1 and 2 in also close proximity, people can walk there. If you're going to go to 3, you might need an Uber in kind of modern times. At the time, if you need a taxi or you needed to drive. So that means that if you're going to partner and bring somebody like a taxi in or an Uber company into this, you have to bring the Uber data into this as well, because you're going to see when Uber basically transports people from one of your locations to another, or from outside of where you are at into your area. And if you do a corporate deal with Uber, you can get access to that data, especially if you are the one originating the rides. So that could then add to your data. So yes, Jess, it was a fairly real scenario.
Okay. And I mean, this is the structure that's being replicated in a digital space. Ultimately, this is nudges, right?
Is it a nudge, or is it, if you had to just think about it for a moment, that the classical data collection mechanism that you're going to be going through is that if you had to think of, every hotel will have a ledger, okay? And in the ledger, you're going to have your time and the items that were bought, and if the customer participated, if they are staying there or not staying there. That means that you would have basically time series data and a ledger from every single hotel that you'll be able to use to be able to figure out if people are moving from one location to another. And you'll be able to hopefully match make the fact that if person A was there, you can pick up person A there and person A there, and you'll be able to reproduce your map to show that people have gone on the journey that you created for them. So the thing is that, if it's just a standard nudge, how would you nudge the person?
By creating the environment that they are most likely to be drawn to.
Yeah, so
or is that just facilitating?
Is the nudge the banner that appears? And if you think about it, the ultimate complexity in measuring if recommenders are doing the right thing or not. So let's just take a classical example in the kind of ecosystem setting is that, let's say that you want to set up an overhead display that appears behind the barman, or in the kind of social place, wherever that social place is. And it doesn't matter if it's in an area where there's alcohol served or anything else served, doesn't matter, but you want to put a banner there. And the digital banner's content is determined based on the voluminous of activity that happens in that facility. So the recommender needs to figure out that I need to explore options based on the context that gets set. And the context that gets set is based on a threshold of sales in that facility. So if you're selling too many daiquiris, you then want to dynamically shift it to something else, and then let the overhead display now let the recommender figure out what it needs to show next. If the crowd gets too raucous, you then only want to promote water and orange juice and, I don't know, soda pops. Something to get everybody to kind of calm down and whatever it might be. But the thing is that is one kind of visual influencer panel. But then to get the person personally connected means that you either then have to get to the person serving them to know who and what they need to serve and provide recommenders to them. Or you have to do it from the person who's actually doing the purchase. And when you are in a social situation, do you ever look at your mobile device? That's kind of the overriding question, isn't it?
So there is a distinctive difference then between the journey and the nudges within that journey. So you could have a journey that's set up, a number of different journeys that is set up that would appeal to different character types. And within those journeys, you could have nudges that would shuffle people into sort of mini journeys within those. Yes. And those would be the nudges themselves. Okay.
No, yeah. But when you think about it, so the business person who's going to draw this on the board or have a conversation with somebody about it will quite quickly realize that this is pretty easy to draw, but not so easy to implement. Because if you're going to have to now provide the technological infrastructure, and let's take a couple of examples of technologies that you can start using now for this. Let's say that you use a geoperimeter tracker. All right, so let's say that you use anything that is geoperimeter tracking. So geoperimeter tracking means that it will create a geoperimeter around your facility, and anybody that moves in that facility from a mobile point of view, you will know what that mobile is that is moving in that space. Okay, and a lot of companies do that already. You can go to most restaurants and, I mean, anything from airports to hospitals to hotels at the moment, all over the world, do geofencing or geo-based tracking. But though that means that you will know that there are people moving in that area. If they pay with their phone, you then want to interface with the payment system. So that means that the geo environment will be for data collection, and the payment system will be hopefully the delivery mechanism for kind of additional data and maybe for coupons that you can then present to the person based on the data that you have collected. So if a person has been there the entire day and you can track back how much money they spent with you, you can then give them an incentive to invite some friends and get more discount, or some other way if the payment was done digitally, because you'll be able to track the fact that geo-tagged phone has now performed the payment with you, because you control the point of sale data. You also control the PLU, so you control the price lookups that happen inside the facility. So that means that you will know, exactly what kind of items are typically bought by that particular person who's been geo-tracked. If we include IoT, you can then get far more clever, because then what you do is you can start putting the geo devices with everybody sitting at tables, and every table can become its own private space, and you can track whoever sits at a particular table or who stands in a certain location, and know that those people have moved or not moved, and then decide if you want to use your overhead banner or some other ways, or find a mechanism to then interface with them, either through a human that is in the system that gets told to interface with the people, or through their payment coupon system or the payment messaging system that they have connected to. And that means that you need to partner with your bank to be able to get that done with you. So the moment they pay for something in your bar, you want to be able to send a text message back to them to say, yes, you have bought this, and here's the offer that goes with that. But you know exactly the context, where they're at, why they bought it, why they're there for that moment. Anybody else has thought about this? Or?
You can get them to do almost anything if they look at their phones.
Yeah, but so that's the thing though. You can, if you get the people to look at their phone, but what if they don't look at their phone? Can't you? And this is the whole thing around having the panels available, or having an alternate mechanism that you can get to the crowd, and your recommenders need to be configured so that the crowd context gets set. And if the crowd starts behaving in a certain way, you will then want to track the fact that, yes, they have altered their behavior because of your panel or your nudge that you've given them, rather than just...
If a retail company, a supermarket or a shop, something to that effect, if you had an app, their app, and your credit card is, say, loaded on their app, like most retail companies have that.
Yes.
And you walk into the shop, if you've got your geo tracking on as part of the settings for that app, as soon as you walk into that shop, should be able to give you recommend discounts based on your previous spending habits.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are already point of sale technologies that do that. And in actual fact, Rob, when we spoke to Tahir about his business, that's what they do. In actual fact, they do it for middle tier retailers. They geo track everybody and make sure that they could integrate the way in which you're going to provide people with loyalty points without having to get them to sign up for anything.
It's got many applications as well. And in a healthcare context, nudging people to change their behaviors.
Yeah, listen, that's an interesting one, because if we think about it, there is a case now. I've spoken to people in I think it was in Florida about that if you had to just think about how many different hotel options there are when a certain procedure has to take place, or there's a certain action, those are normally they're big ticket items, and a fewer kind of, if you have to think about it from an event point of view, there are fewer events that happen where people have to go and find primary care. But as soon as you look at secondary and other kinds of activities, I think that for people who need to take certain kinds of medication, or are involved in certain assistance program, like if you are looking after, if you're an elderly care person or whatever it might be, I think that your interfacing and your messaging is a crucial part of that. So that means that if you have everybody sitting on 5G and you've got an IoT-based approach, it means that people must just allow the geo-tracking to be on, or what they have to do is have one of these. So you just stick a little Google tracker and everything that you've got, little Apple device, and off you go. You can track anything you like, and you'll be able to pick up the data. And if you look at these air tags can be thrown in anything, and you can track. And that's I think that this whole construct of tracking it for medical or other purposes is definitely entering mass market, because you can connect it to your existing mobile or technology infrastructures.
So going back to the nudge thing, something I've been dying to broach now for a bit, nudges clearly seem to work. And yet, I'm not sure if anybody saw, but there was a little minor explosion not so long ago around nudges are not actually working, or at least they can't prove that they are.
Yeah, I read that piece too, and the research seems to be more focused on bias in publications, academic publications, than real life situations. So I don't think that you necessarily have to look at it purely in the context of the original nudge theory. The fact that I'm treating you as a mindless human and I'm going to guide you to some alternative outcomes. I don't think that you should look at it like that. And that's why even in our world, remember, we use the language intervention. Yes. Because if I decide to participate in a particular campaign with a client or with a company, and I am the client, and let's say I'm a telco client or a banking client or a retail client, whatever that might be, you want to make sure that they are transparent with you around how they're going to engage with you. You don't want to feel that you are being nudged or being forced or being coerced into something. But what you probably want to feel, and if you think about what companies who have done it successfully have kind of shown us, is that you want the intervention to make you feel good about yourself. And if you feel good about what you have done, you want to make sure that the service or the product that you've engaged in, they also got benefit from you doing well. So that's why if you take a wellness lens on it and a customer lifetime value lens, you will see it very differently than if you just look at it as the fact that I'm going to do a singular nudge to you and keep on pushing you to get to a certain outcome. So I think that the staging theory behind nudging, I think, works well because all of us are. If you think of the acts that you perform or the number of steps that you perform when you purchase something new, and then once you've purchased it, the post-purchase remorse and the kind of questioning what you bought, and then from then on defending it at all costs because you already bought it. There are some cycles that are pretty well defined in the world of marketing, and especially the psychology of how markets work. So it's not necessarily just a nudge theory challenge. It is really a challenge of how do you intervene and how do I provide you with enough evidence that what you're going to be doing next is good for you and me. That's kind of the holy grail. I think if you can get to that space, you
need to really take it back to basic human to human interactions as well, because we do nudge each other on a daily basis, just in basic interactions, and it's not manipulative or pushy. It's just, it is what it is. So if you can get that sort of machine to human relationship to act the same, then
think about, that's a great point to make, because if you had to just think of, let's take this case from an example point of view. If you had to think of in the last time that you were in a social setting where people around you were consuming, I don't know, soda pop or tequila, it doesn't matter which way you look at it, at some point somebody is going to want to convince you to have what they have or try what they have or taste what they taste. And what you find is that social influencing system is what was used in the context of social media companies to exploit that network's capability. So that means that it's almost like you are more interested, and if you think of the evidence is pretty clear in the social media world, you are far more interested in your friends' opinions about the products that you have bought than the companies who sold you the product's opinion about what they think is important to you, because the great marketing lie is kind of well entrenched in many places. So that means that the influence that you want to exert over that collective, and if you take a social view on it, means that you need to find the influencer. You need to find, and if you had to take maybe kind of a bit of a network graph view on this, and you look at, let's say at time zero, you are the only one in a particular facility, and you get to time one and it's you and a number of other people. And the challenge with data collection, other than if you look at social science, you having to go and research it, is that knowing that this person is central and these are not, is very difficult to determine unless you have a technological tracking mechanism. And that's why social media is so important in a lot of these kind of situations generically, because you will know that if you had to think in this case, this relationship make this person far more important than these relationships, because they are 2 degrees removed people that made that person important and makes you important. So that means the centralities that are created around this individual in the middle will give you a sense that if you take that person out of the network, there will be a structural hole, and you'll break a lot of what was creating the cohesiveness in that conversation. So that means that by the time we get to time 2, and this has evolved, and let's say that this one has only got one of the networks gone, and it's shifted to somebody else that is now new, and this person is still in the center, you could start seeing that the between-us centrality in this person was quite high, and you will only know that if you track this dynamic network over a longer period of time, and you can see how the nodes are shifting over time when some are taken away and some are added. So the idea is that if you could do that automatically without having to get the person to sign up for a social media platform, and you can get that done in a, let's say, a bar or something like that, or in an office where people are working, or in a restaurant, you will be able to see that if you influence one person, you can have impact on everybody around them. And you'll be able to track how many ideas are moving. And this is a concept called the community that we can talk about at some point. The community is the distance that an idea can travel in a network and the pace. So that means you create a community that all start believing the same things. Because what could happen in this case is that these people here and that person there had opposing views. So when the opposing views started playing out, that person decided that they'll stay, but their friends all fled because they don't want to believe what these people believe. And you can normally track that if you have a dynamic network over time, because you can see it in the centralities that the between-us would have been very different. So here, the between-us would have been high and the between-us would have been low. So the closeness would have been high on both situations. So if you cut it as like a data set, and you know that you've got these time brackets, you can see the shifting movements, and that influences how you would then recommend things to them. Anyway, it's just maybe.
Rob, you're on mute.
I've got a different question, but related to behavior. My banking, everybody thinks that their banking behavior, they know exactly what's going on with their finances, and the way that they spend
we know
money
that that's not true.
is the best.
Yeah.
So one of my behaviors is I always go, when I go onto my banking app, I go in, I log on in the accounts, I look at my accounts and see, okay, they're all looking best than what I'd like them to be. And I go and move money around depending on maybe the house account needs a bit more money, or the business account, or whatever it is needs a little bit more money around, and then I log off. So and maybe once or twice in a month, do I even stop to look at any of the other ads or nudges that that bank has sent me? How would you get me to change my behavior? To go look at something that might improve my wellness, my overall spending habits?
Yeah, Robbie, we've been working on that for a while. And I think that if you're a person who's got a specific ritual, the only way to get the attention of a person that's performing a certain ritual is to change the ritual. So that means there must be a step in the middle that gives you language that you have not seen before. And I think the biggest crisis in the context of a lot of banking that I've seen is that they make an assumption that every time you sign in, you're seeing exactly the same message. It's going to get you to act on anything useful. Because unless it's novel and it's exciting and it's engaging, why would you ever want to act on it? And it doesn't matter if it's your bank or your social media provider. That means that there needs to be a degree of novelty, and also a way in which you can try diverse options. So that means your ability to do continuous experimentation is amplified in importance. You know what I mean? So if you think of like your example, just going in and doing certain things, what you might look at as well, if the product manager who owns a part of the business that let's just say that they sell loans, and I'm the loan product manager, and I see that you move money around and you don't need a loan, so why should I give you a nudge? I'm the person from mortgage, so why should I nudge you for mortgages? I'm from vehicle and asset finance, or I'm from the transactional side, or whatever it is. Why should I nudge you? So that's why you see that most banking institutions, when you sign in, don't break your path unless they really have to. The time when they do break the path is when you perform certain transactions. And let's say that the bank has done a deal with a service provider in the context of, let's take a kind of a different network. Let's say that you're over here, the bank is over there, and the retailer is over there. What happens is the bank has signed a deal with a retailer that basically said to the retailer, if people buy product from you with our card, we will pay you. So the bank is incentivized to nudge you to buy from this retailer and not this retailer, because that could be retailer A and this is retailer B. So they get incentivized to send you there because there's a direct monetary return. And in modern banks, if you go look at their annual reports, you'll see that the revenue that they make from those kind of relationships are enormous. It's a huge ticket item. So that means that intervening with the person on the ground at a transaction level is far more exciting than when they perform maintenance-based activities. So because then you don't want to break their sequence so that they'll feel that they're not happy with what you're providing them.
A related question. If now you figured out that I want something, I do a certain, that this is my ritual and you're going to break it up. If you break it up on a consistent pattern, or a pattern that to me feels consistent,
then it's also pointless.
Then it's pointless. So how would you keep changing that?
So the idea is that if you had to think of kind of two tracks of deliberate design, and you look at deliberate design versus intelligent design, and as a construct. Deliberate design says that I've designed a digital journey that will get people to go from a login screen to an option screen to an action screen, whatever it might be. And this route to get me from one place to the next has been coded. So if you had to take it in the ecosystem context, if you use a recommender over here, and let's say you got recommender 1 will tell you what the options are that must appear. Recommender 2 will tell you which menu items to and which options to place in the path of the person to select. And you have recommender 3 to tell you which particular items you should take action on. And that means that you can still influence a deliberate design journey with some form of novelty without destabilizing the technical sequence that is normally quite hardwired in something that has been deliberately designed to do something. The intelligent design story is a bit different. What it is, it becomes a container-based approach where you have got containers that need to get you through a concept. So the concept could be, I need to identify you, I need to get a selection from you, and I need to get an action from you. Okay, so let's look at those three things that are normally used in anything that from a design point of view. To identify you means that there must be a login page that happens. In the login page now, what you could do is you can set 2 recommenders in motion. Recommender 1 is the one that's going to tell you what the page looks like. And recommender 2 is the one that's going to recommend the messages that appear to get you to sign in or to sign up, depending on what it is that you have done or what you need to do. By the time you get to the selection, the recommender 1, now you've got your third recommender, will tell you what the form is that you must use. So it will tell you what this looks like. And your recommender 4 will tell you what to place inside. And then you get to recommender 5, will tell you what the page is, and recommender 6 will tell you what the options are. So that's the outcome. So the outcome is that you make the decisions as to what to display a recommenders problem. And you design a certain series, a certain type of recommender that will decide what that content is, similar to what you would do with an A/B test. So you could make the recommender 2, so recommender 1, or these kind of recommenders that are for the design space, could be based on a context where these could be based on a user or a customer. So you could track it individually to see that it's something that's just for you, that highly specific just for the person. So what I think what most people have not even been able to get their minds around is dealing with this deliberate way of using recommenders on every single page that they present to a customer. They can't get their minds around this notion yet, and now we want them to already go to intelligent, and I think things get stuck there. And we've seen that in some clients, because they love to talk about it. People understand it, they can see it, until they have to do it, and then it just...
The technical inertia is a big issue. I'm sure there are companies and customers that can solve that.
All right. So about the social network stuff and the centralities from social media, I've never worked with anything like that, so I'm kind of imagining how that works. Do they look at likes and views and comments to build social graphs of influence?
Yeah, yes, but not as in not only that. It's a multidimensional problem. So there are different graph styles. So if you had to think of, Facebook uses a thing called the social graph. And a social graph, the basis of the theory is saying that it's how one human interacts with another human. And the interaction could be of different types. So that means the type could be, I befriended you, or comment on something that you have said on that relationship. So that means that you find that the arcs and the nodes, or the relationship between these two nodes, form their own transactions that you then track with its own network. If you look at Google, it's got the knowledge graph. And the knowledge graph essentially is a multi-network type. So that means you got content, news, the person, the site, and it forms a relationship between all of those related elements so that you can navigate it in different directions. And I'm sure you've all seen the knowledge graph. If you just quickly look at this, I'll show you. It'll take slightly more than 5 minutes, Rob. Let's see if my screen is shared. So if you go to, let's say you go to Google and you want to navigate the knowledge graph, and let's say you type in, I don't know, let's take an actor. So when you search for the actor, the result that comes back, you'll see there that there are different types of result that comes back. So there's the top nodes, the details about the person, movies. Now you can see that it's a one to many, back to one to many. Down the side here, you'll see that it's got one to many, right? So that means you see a relationship that has got a central node in a network, and it's got relationships to all of these other items. If you then pick a movie, see what happens at the top there now, the strip that appears. That strip that appears now is a many to one again, because now what it does, it took it from Brad Pitt to the many items, and the many back to the cast that is a many. And if you click on any one of these people, like I could click on Brad Pitt, I'm back to where I started. So that means the knowledge graph allows you to navigate this multidimensional view purely based on whatever you put in your search phrase. And it's all network based. The entire data set is basically designed to be a network. If I change this, and let's say that I wanted to go from Limerick to Dublin, immediately it will make an assumption that there's no ways that you're going to, well, in this case, it says that you can drive there, so because it's a short distance. But the thing is that what happens is that if you had to go from let's take Johannesburg, Cape Town. It then returns the flights and then the drive. So what happens is the knowledge graph interprets what you give it, and it then determines the node set that gives you the highest degree of relevance. That is what's known as page rank. And page rank centrality is when it looks at what options are most relevant. So if you now go to show flights, the flights that are shown, again, sits on a graph. It sits on a network. Anyway, so that's just maybe like an abstract example. But if you go to LinkedIn, LinkedIn uses a thing called the economic graph. The economic graph links the person with a job and a company. It's almost by accident that they got themselves into business media, because people use it not really as an employment site. It was designed purely to be an employment site. And people use it often to share news and other things. It was never designed. Its total kind of focus of revenue model is on getting placements, wanting people to connect for jobs. That is its base business. But because people didn't want to do it in Facebook, they don't want to do the social graph, they prefer the economic graph, because economic graph means that I can connect to companies. And if I have a company and I want to promote it, instead of promoting it to a candidate, I can promote it to somebody that wants to buy my product. So they kind of evolved away from the initial intention to where they are today. Yeah, so all digital companies work like that, even music. So music has got, if you think of Spotify, it's got two integrated networks. So the network of music providers, including distributors and labels, and music consumers. And the consumer often gets represented through like your bookmarks or your playlists or whatever it is that you've created to be able to connect to it. So that means that it's all graph-based. They do matching. If you go to sites like Tinder, it's graph-based, or any one of those. Any digital site that you know other than your local bank will use graph or a network-based approach. Yeah, it's very widely adopted. That's why, by the way, you'll see if you go in the ecosystem workbench, you'll see there's an enrichment type called genetic graph. It generates a whole bunch of types of centralities on a data set for you. We've also added a module that was external that's in our, when you go to network graph, you can draw network graphs from data sets that were created. That's all part of the core product. So